joining us. We have, I know you all have their bios, but right now we're going to go into session with State Representative Pam Marsh and Ron Morgan of the Democratic Party of Oregon. Please welcome them both.
So, how wonderful to be here today and to see all of you. I usually get about 48 hours at home. We're in session now. Come home Friday night, go back Sunday night because I have to be there by 8 a.m. on Monday. And I just feed on these opportunities to meet with people and see what you are doing and hear the inspiration from people in the district. So thank you for being here and thank you for inviting me to be here with you. I think most of this session is really going to be about what Ron has to share with us because he's a real organizer. He's an official organizer with the Democratic Party. And I'm a little bit of a diversion because what I have to share with you isn't really the main agenda for today. The main agenda for today is all about the congressional district, right? And changing personnel that currently sit in that congressional district. And we have about 150 million reasons why that's really important to do. But what I'm about to tell you, just briefly, as the diversion, is that's not the whole job. Because although we're focused on that federal level, we really still have important work to do at the state level. And while I know that's not what you came here to talk about, I feel responsible to tell you how important that really is. At the state level, we are dealing with some very fundamental issues that will affect all of you, regardless of what happens on the federal level. Healthcare is an example. We know we've got this toxic partisanship at the federal level that's put healthcare into a tremendous amount of ambiguity right now. We don't know what's going to come out of that healthcare discussion. But even without any impact from the federal level, we have a big healthcare discussion going on at the state level that's independent of that. We have a budget that's 1.6 or 1.8, depending on how you calculate it, in debt as we enter into the session, and about half of that is healthcare. So even if we get full support from the federal level, we need to make decisions on our state level as to whether we are going to try to round up the resources we need to keep Medicaid expansion in place, to continue the transformation that really began way back in the early 90s in this state, that really predated what went on the federal level. Despite what happens at the federal level, we have other opportunities ahead of us at the state level if we have the political will to do so. We know that we have a president who is not interested in climate. We thought Obama wasn't strong enough on that. But now we have a guy who's trying his very best to get oil back out of the ground and to put coal miners to work in defiance of everything we know about what's actually happening to the planet and to the climate. But we here on the Oregon level have an opportunity to move forward on our own, and we can do that. We are working right now at the state level on a number of different environmental fronts. The most central of those is to put in place a cap and invest system where we would actually put a cap on greenhouse gas emissions that we would ratchet down over time. It really sets a backstop for all of our work with climate. We're working on other efforts to reinvent the Department of Energy as the Department of Energy and Climate. We're working on efforts to increase and maintain tax credits for renewable energy products in your home, to establish ways to have funding sources for renewable energy projects in our homes and in our businesses. So there's much happening at that state level, despite whatever happens at the federal level. We're going to move forward on the state level. These are just examples of where all of us in the state of Oregon, a state of 4 million people, who basically all know each other, have the opportunity to move forward despite whatever happens on the federal level. But this is all about politics, right? Right now at the state level, we have a Democratic majority in both the House and the Senate. We have a Democratic governor. That doesn't mean it's as easy as it should be. And what I want to tell you is how essential it is that we keep those majorities as we go forward. When I used to hear about the majority, minority, I used to think of those in terms of, the couple of votes you need on the floor and whether or not you can steal a Republican to push something forward. Actually, it's much more fundamental than that, as I've discovered in being up there. Having majority means the majority party gets to appoint every committee chairperson. Every committee chairperson gets to control every bill that's ever heard within that committee. That means that our Democratic chair people have been able to keep bills such as a bill that came forward that would ask the state to take back under control federal lands from ever getting a hearing, right? Bills about school vouchers from ever getting a hearing. Bills about abortion from ever getting a hearing. What I have learned and what I want to share with you is how essential it is that we continue to do the work at the state level to make sure that we have Democrats in control in both the House and the Senate. And as you know, last year with the very unexpected and heartbreaking loss of Dr. Bates, we had a Senate campaign here in this district that we lost. We now have a Republican in that seat. He's not a bad guy. I work with him fine. We collaborate. But he's still a Republican, and he's still, as a result, going to vote Republican on a lot of the big issues that come forward. That seat is going to come up in 2 or 4 years, and we're going to need to be out there to get that seat back, because the difference of 1 seat in the state Senate is going to make a difference as to whether we control those committees, whether we control the legislation that comes up, and all of that is direct consequences for all of us who live and raise our families and support our communities here in the state of Oregon. So without further ado, I'll wrap this up, but I think I would love to take your questions later on if you want to discuss what's happening at the state level. But the main message is we can't just stop with the fact. It's hard enough to unseat Greg Walden, but that is not enough, actually, as it turns out. We need every one of you to be watching and stepping up and really participating on the state level, because in many ways what happens on the state level has more immediate and direct consequences for our communities than action that happens way back in Washington. So that's sort of what I have to share today. And now Ron, I think, is going to, we're different, quite different in our presentations here, but we're in the same piece on the program. So Ron is, do you want to introduce, Ron is
I'll introduce myself. Okay. Because I have a title that doesn't make any sense.
Okay. And I'm going to stand by, and maybe we'll both take questions and answers as time goes on.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here presenting with you. You guys are great. My job title that I was just referring to is Political Organizing Coordinator. I'm the only coordinator on staff, and I don't know what that means. And it's taken me almost 3 years to figure out what it means. And what it means is I'm a surfer. I wait for waves of people to come along, and I try and swim ahead of it far enough that I can catch that wave and help people get to the shore. You guys had a great presentation earlier by a couple of activists who were describing how to organize and put together effective direct actions. I'm here to teach you how to be not just activists, but organizers, and to talk about that, because it's different skill sets. There's a Venn diagram where they overlap, but it's a different mindset, and it's about being sustainable. And I came to be an organizer because I was just like you. I was professionally, I was a carpenter. I was a building contractor in California for 25 years, and I had a heart issue that took me into politics. There was something I believed in strongly enough that I began to volunteer my time regularly to push that issue, and work with state legislatures, lobbying, being a citizen lobbyist, going to other states. I became part of an executive committee that worked on this issue all across the country, and I wasn't getting paid for this. This was on top of my regular job. I came to a point where I was working 60 hours a week on the stuff I wasn't getting paid for. And I was caring less and less about being a carpenter. But that wasn't working for my family. It wasn't paying my rent. In 2001, I accepted a position for a community organizer at a neighborhood center in the city where I lived. And they did youth and senior services, and they developed affordable housing. And they had, from their beginning, they were about 25 years old when as an agency, when I hooked up with them, They'd always had a community organizer because they felt it was integral to moving their agenda forward. They could serve their clients better if they had an organizer. And my job there was taking their clients and turning them from clients and dependents into leaders. You know, doing the work, taking them to City Hall. This is your house. This is City Hall. This is where your funding comes for your programs. And I love that work. I love that work. In doing that work, and getting, you know, I didn't get paid much, but I got paid. In doing that work, I found a sustainable place where I could keep doing my activism. And I learned to flip from being an activist to an organizer. And that meant listening to people. Instead of being the expert in the room all the time, and the person who embodied an issue, because that's what I'd been before, I became the person at the back of the room who were bringing the people who were directly affected to the front of the room and giving them the voice to tell their stories. I'm here today because on election night, about 10 p.m., when the reality of Trump's victory started to set in, our website at the DPO blew up. Our volunteer forums, people going, I'm freaked out, what do I do? I'm freaked out, what do I do? And we didn't have an answer. We're a political party and we are designed for election cycles. We are designed to elect Democrats. And we're pretty good at it. We get people like Pam Marsh elected. What we're not designed to do is be activists in the off cycle. When I call those people back who were leaving us, I mean hundreds of people were leaving us messages, and I was calling back just to find out what they were about. They were telling me, I've never been involved in politics before. You know, I vote, but I've never been active in politics before. And that blew my mind, because last year was the most immersive political environment I ever remember. There were people coming out of the woodwork who were saying the same things, but they were involved. This was like the next wave of people coming who may have voted for Bernie, who may have voted for Hillary, but weren't involved in the campaign. And now they wanted stuff to do. I kept my ears and eyes open. I saw when the Indivisible Guide was published online, took a look at it, downloaded it, read it, shared it with my boss. We both agreed this was a great thing. But it wasn't, there was not a leader. There was not a figure, a charismatic figure up there telling people what to do. It was just a tool. You guys took up that tool, and now you're here. And you guys have been doing great work. And I'm here because you're here. What I do in the Democratic Party normally is I interact with the county parties. We have now county parties in every county in Oregon. We just formed a Sherman County. And that's because people like you volunteered to do that. There are only 8 paid staff in the Democratic Party in Oregon for the whole state. And I'm the only paid organizer. So the rest of the people who are the county chairs, the county secretaries, the people who do the day-to-day work, who staff the offices, who set up the meetings, they're all volunteers. They're just people like you. When I hear people talk about the Democratic establishment, that means those are people who volunteered in 2004, just like you're volunteering now. If you stick around long enough, you'll be the establishment. And it goes in waves like that. Our county parties have experienced incredible growth because of you. I was speaking to Fran Davis, who's the chair of Jefferson County Democrats, and they would have meetings every month with 5 people, the same 5 people. And they would play musical chairs with the responsibilities. Do you want to be chair this year? Sure. Yeah. Now they have 35 and 40 people going to their meetings, and it'll grow. What we are trying to do, and we're pushing upward. You know, we've been pushing this for a few years, but it's finally seeping up to the leadership, is the concept of doing this community-based organizing. I had the honor of listening to Congressman Keith Ellison a week ago Friday. Came to Portland, talked to 800 of us in one room and another 100 afterwards in another room. And he told us that the message from the top down now is you have to go out in the communities, you have to talk to people. And we're going, yeah, we've been telling you that for a couple of years now. So our time is now, basically, is what I'm saying. There's a sense, you know, I've been going to small indivisible groups, people's houses, over the course of the last 3 months over in the Portland Metro, just to be a resource and go answer questions. People have a lot of questions about the party. Why aren't you doing this? Why are you doing this? And I answer them to the best of my ability. And I cover away from that with the realization that people view the Democratic Party as a pyramid with a giant eyeball on top. The giant eyeball is the DNC, and everything flows down to the little slaves underneath, and we're all in lockstep. And in reality, it's the opposite that's true. And in reality, the grassroots is what drives the party here, and it seeps down to the DNC. And there's structural reasons for that. The DNC used to be extremely powerful as an organization in the 90s, during Bill Clinton's administration. They could accept unlimited amounts of donations, and they could give them to whomever they pleased. And that was an era of soft money. You may remember that, if you may have heard that. And that meant that people could donate anonymously, and the DNC could act as kingmakers. They could give money to candidates all over the place. And they did. And then something happened called McCain-Feingold, which is campaign finance reform. There was a lot of push to change that, to get money out of politics. Chapter 1. What that did is that limited the ability of the DNC to fund candidates directly. They're bound, they can only give $5,000 in each federal race. That's all. So in Kansas and Georgia, they can give directly to a candidate $5 grand, which isn't much in terms of politics. What happened is the DCCC, which is an organization formed in the leadership caucus of the Democrats in Congress, Nancy Pelosi, and the leaders there, they fund congressional candidates. And they do so following their own agenda. Nancy Pelosi wants to get a certain type of Democrat elected. And it may not jive with who the persons in the state want to get. So that determines. And we have no control over them. They do what they want to do. The state party is in the same boat as the DNC. We can't give unlimited money to a worthy candidate in a congressional district. We can only give $5,000. But we can do other things. We can hire staff that works. And we do every 2 years. We create something called the coordinated campaign. It is the campaign of all the federal Democratic candidates and all the statewide Democratic candidates. And we are their field operation. So you don't have 8 different field offices. You have one combined office. Last year we had a field office in Bend. And it was very active. It was a good office. But we don't give CD2 a lot of love. And the reason for that is that the coordinated campaign is basically funded by the candidates, by the congressional district, the 4 Democratic candidates, and the governor, and whoever else has a little money down the ticket. And they all sit at a table, and they call it, this is the table. Is the table meeting today? Yeah, the table's meeting today. And they decide how much of their money they're willing to put in for other people. And it's like a poker game. And it's based on self-interest. It's based on altruism to a degree, but it's mostly based on self-interest. So if there is a candidate in CD2 that doesn't appear to have a chance of winning, they're not going to feel the love. And that's just a reality. What you guys have been doing is creating the groundwork for a quality candidate to come out of. We're not allowed in an open primary, which is what you have, to help any one candidate. We have to keep our thumb off the scale. So we aren't recommending a candidate to you guys. Earlier when a presenter called me out and said, what about that? I had to go, I can't say. You know, we can give resources equally to all of the declared Democratic candidates. We can give them access to the voter file, for instance, which is a massive database of all of the registered voters in CD2 with enhanced data. So they can form target lists of people that they talk to get to vote for them. But we give that to everybody. We can give trainings, but we give them to everybody. We have to be careful. We don't even do forums because it puts us in an uncomfortable position of having to mediate between their campaigns. And that has a sorry history. Those blow up more often than not. So that's kind of the basic, and I want to be available for questions, because usually people have questions about the party and what we can do and what we can't do, and I'm here to answer those. Are there any questions? Yeah.
You said we're organized
Could
around our
everybody stand up
counties.
and give us your name and where you're from?
Me,
Thank you.
Trumbull from Redmond.
Yeah.
You say that we're organized by counties, basically.
Yes.
What I'm finding is our Democrats in Redmond, we get tired of driving over to Bend for every little meeting
Sure.
or whatever.
Yeah.
We would love to have some help in establishing a Democratic Party group in the town of Redmond.
Okay.
And I don't know if other towns are the same way, but
Yes.
it does look like we've got interest, so I think we could do that. And we have done this neighborhood leader thing,
Yes.
and we have 26 neighborhood leaders in the town of Redmond.
Yes.
These are Democrats who will go out every election and knock on doors.
Yes.
I don't know whether the other counties are doing that or not, but it's working apparently really well.
Let me talk to them.
Okay, go for it, Alan.
Yeah, I'm Alan Hallmark. I live in Talent here. Ron is going to be coming down again at the fourth Thursday, and he's going to be our program for the Jackson County Democrats Central Committee meeting. I believe it's the 25th.
Yep.
Yep. Thursday, the 25th, at the Oregon Education Association office in Medford at Lowry Lane at South Pacific Highway. And I hope you guys will come, because he's going to get us started learning about this neighborhood leader program that you were talking about, so that we can get that going here in Jackson County. And so we can be a whole lot more effective in organizing and in getting our candidates elected.
Yes.
So,
Thank
I
you.
want y'all to come back and hear Ron again on the 25th in Medford at the ODA.
I'm happy to do that. I was part of the original panel in Washington County that designed the Neighborhood Leader Program about 9 years ago. I worked over there as their field organizer, and after the 2008 election, a bunch of us got together and said, how can we be more effective at turning out progressive voters? And there was a lot of research that had been published that the most effective way to get people to vote, to actually do the act of voting, handing in their ballot, was contact with a human being, preferably in their neighborhood, who asked them to vote. It was that simple. Politicians and political campaigns spend millions of dollars every election cycle getting TV ads, sending out glossy mailers, and more people ignore those. You know, I don't know about you, I don't own a TV anymore. I watch all of my programming online, right? I don't see those commercials. The glossy mailers, they've done research on this too. The average time people have with those is about 6 seconds. They get it, they walk it over to the recycling bin, and that's it, you know? So we are returning, I mean, this program is as old as political history. You know, the old ward healers used to be people who lived in the neighborhood and would walk the neighborhood. They would heal the ward, you know, and talk to people one-on-one and get them to vote. The advantage that we have now is that we have the technology to create lists of those voters, so that you are going not just to every household, but you're going to friendly households. You're going to people who are Democrats or progressives, and they may not vote every year. You heard this earlier. There are people who vote every time they see a ballot. We call them 4 out of 4 voters. Every 4 elections, they vote. Doesn't matter what the issue is, what the candidate is, they vote. They'll turn in a ballot. But there are 2 out of 4 voters. There's 1 out of 4 voters. There's people who only vote during the presidential campaigns. And those are the people you're going to have to convince next year to physically fill out their ballot and turn it in. And they're on your side already. That's the thing. These are people who will vote for you as long as they vote. And the program itself is simplicity. I mean, it's you're given a list of people, they're your voters, and they'll be your voters next election cycle as well. You form a relationship with them. We have used this as a get out the vote tool up until now. We are going to be using it as a canvassing tool in the intervening months between now and 18 to create those relationships. And we'll be creating Canvas questions that are open-ended to get people to talk to you, you talk to them, and it's not about their answer, it's about the relationship. And we're hoping that you join us. Yes?
Sarah Spansale, Ashland. I just would like to piggyback kind of off what you're saying and what Alan has said. I and Alan are both, and Colette are state central committee representatives for Jackson County. We started, or we are that because we are PCPs, or precinct committee people. I would just like to give a plug for being a PCP and being involved in that way. I think that that's part of how we got to where we are today. I know years ago when the Tea Party started, I think that was a big piece of their movement, was becoming involved with the Republican Party, getting active in it. My understanding is that Jackson County Republicans have all of their 600 some positions for PCPs filled in our county. I don't know what we're currently at in Jackson County for Democrats, but I think we're around 100
or something.
well, on the rolls, maybe a little over 100 at this point, and that's only because we've grown a lot since Trump's election. But as far as it being bottom up politics as well, like that's how we make it bottom up, is by regular people being involved as PCPs, especially if you don't live in Ashland. Please consider becoming a PCP. I think Colette and I both have applications on us right now, if you're interested, and we have our cards, so feel free to talk to us about that, or Alan as well. Where, if you're in other counties, I'm sure that it's a similar process. So, but yeah, it's really important, I think, that it is that system, and that's not going to happen if people aren't involved at that most grassroots level.
Well, that's why I said I was a surfer, because I can set up these grassroots systems, but without grassroots support, they don't make any sense. Yeah.
I'm Sarah Kellum again from Hood River. So I'm really encouraged to hear that there are now active Democratic groups in each county. Being from Hood River County, we're one of, as I understand it, the top 3 population numbers of count in the district. I believe it's essential for the resistance groups across the district to be able to be heard. My understanding is, I've heard from multiple sources that the reason there aren't people from the far northeast and southeast portions of our district here this weekend is they are afraid to identify themselves.
Yes.
And that's something that deeply concerns me. So I'm wondering how this neighbor model and this, I feel really comfortable, like in our home county, rolling that out and expanding that. I know that there's efforts in place with our Democratic group, but as far as in those counties where people are afraid to identify in that way, how is that being addressed? And also, how can we then build resistance to Walden and help support people in those other counties who can't be here today?
Yeah. Well, in answer to your first question, it's taking baby steps. Last year, we had a Grant County party identified at Forum, and they joined the Neighborhood Leader Program, and they were out talking. These lists that we give out are for people who we predict will be friendly. We can't be 100% sure, but you're not going to up a driveway that we think is going to be unfriendly. And if it looks unfriendly, don't go. Your safety is the first priority. What happens is, if you start to build groups, you start to identify one another. At first you think you're the only Democrat in the county. Then you realize, oh, there's 3 or 4 others. Or there are more progressives here than I thought. And it's an identifying process. Let's see, you were next.
My name is Paul Dietrich. I'm from Ashland. I'm also a PCP. Could you please speak to the candidate recruitment process within the Department?
Well, we don't. I'm in charge, actually I'm the staff lead in our local elections project. And we do go out and recruit people to run for school board elections, for nonpartisan offices who are Democrats, because we want our values represented on these local boards. I said earlier in another presentation, these are frontline workers for progressive values. The person who's on the school board is going to protect kids who are immigrants. We'll protect LGBT. We'll make sure that there are policies in place, that they're not victimized by the Trump agenda. When it comes to the congressional district, or even, you know, we may reach out to talk to people, but we can't recruit. It's an open primary. You know, there's an open position to be the Democratic nominee at this point in Congressional District 2. And so we wait for people to self-identify. They come to us and we talk to them and we give them referrals, but we have to be very careful that we're not favoring them. Because we get into trouble if we do that. The perception that we, you know, the DNC was doing their thing last year and it was disgusting, you know. And here in Oregon, I was talking to Bernie people. I was training Bernie groups how to voter registration. I was offering the same thing to the Hillary campaign. It was very even-handed. We had no position, but we were still tarred by the perception that we're the establishment and that we are favoring one candidate over another. It was very frustrating. It's very frustrating for our operations director, who functions as our receptionist, who would get horrible phone calls every day, people yelling at her, you know, just terrible things, you know. You guys are in the tank for so-and-so. You know. So we're very careful. You know, right now, there are 3 people I know of who have declared they're interested in running for Walden's seat on the Democratic side. There may be more. And we have to be very careful that we don't appear to be favoring one over the other.
What are the 3 names?
Jim Crary, Bill what's his name? What's his last name? Yeah. Michael Byrne. That's it. Michael Byrne and Julian Bell.
And who?
Julian Bell.
Julian Bell.
And where are they from in the district?
National.
Yeah. 2 of the Jim Crary's from down here. Julian Bell's from down here, and Michael Burns from Hood River.
Yeah, I'm Josh Berger. I live up in Sisters, and I have two questions for each of you. One regarding you're from there are a lot of independents.
Yes.
I'm an independent. I'm progressive, but I've chosen to not identify with either political party. So what do you do as an independent? That's one question. The other question is more legislative. I appreciate what you said about working on the clean energy jobs bill and so on, and all the great things that can be done on a state level. I think that's really part of resisting the Trump agenda is making state laws, and there's a lot happening on the whole Pacific Coast. So, like, for example, in California, there's a single-payer bill in the legislature there. There's a single-payer bill in the legislature in Washington. So can we band together to do things across the Pacific, whether it's on clean energy? I mean, California is the 7th largest economy in the world. Can we take the whole Pacific and make let's make that is the resistance. It's Pacifica, whatever you want to call it,
Our own healthcare consortium.
Yeah,
Right.
so.
And do you want to talk first?
Go for you go first.
I think those opportunities are absolutely there, and it sure could help if we had a few more Democrats in the legislature, because
Sure.
I've got 35 Democrats and I need 36 votes to pass a tax measure. And those 35 Democrats don't speak with one voice. I can tell you we are a varied group. To get all 35 of us to vote for a significant measure will be an enormous step, and we got to find another Republican to step in there. The clean energy bill, I went into the legislature with clean energy as my first priority. I talked about it all during the campaign. It remains my first priority, and it is very difficult, even with all these Democratic majorities, to get environmental bills and specifically climate to the top of the agenda. We're in the top 5 or 6 now. We've done the base work. We got to get to number 3 in everybody's list, and then we got to get to number 1 in everybody's list. So it's constant advocacy. And another vote from Hood River, where there is always a competitive race, and Bend, where there is likely to be an empty seat next year, because most likely the person who holds it is going to run for governor, which is a whole nother discussion that we need to have at some point, would help, right? And yes, there are tremendous possibilities, particularly on the energy front. Some of us got to go down to California and meet with legislators and people in their administration about their climate cap legislation down there. They are very eager to work with us, as are people in Ontario who are doing far out groundbreaking climate work. But we
Olympia?
still have to, no, in Ontario, in Canada. Way ahead of where we are. Amazing stuff going on up there. But we have to have the momentum to get that to the top of our agenda in Oregon so that we are, ready to say yes to being part of that consortium. And it's going to be very difficult. We will make some strides this year. Whether we will get the cap in place during this legislative session is a long shot. And that's sort of the ugly reality of even having a majority. A majority is not really quite enough. We need like a super majority, and we need people to constantly be advocating on the state level.
And in terms of being an independent, I'm assuming you're a non-affiliated voter, not a member of the Independent Party of
No,
Oregon.
I'm not a member of the Independent.
Yeah, because there's
That's a
some,
whole other deal.
yeah, smoky, yeah. Do you make up, you're the second largest group of people, registered voters in the district. There are more of you than there are registered Democrats in CD2. So we're going to have to figure out a strategy of how to appeal to non-affiliated voters, as well as how to integrate allied non-affiliated voters into our campaign strategy.
Like I can't be a PCP.
No,
right?
but you could be a neighborhood leader.
I could be a neighborhood.
Right.
voter.
And there's a whole science that we may not have time to talk about today. I'm not the person to talk about it anyway, about just identifying, first off, of those independent voters who is aligned with democratic values.
Right, and District
there's-
County is going to start to do that. They're really looking
Yeah.
at how should we go about doing that.
Right.
Doug Walker, Grants Pass.
Yes.
So earlier today, we saw a presentation by the two people that came first, and there was some language there that they showed us as a example of what the Republicans have done to drive the emotion and the language choice and vocabulary and to be effective. It would be nice if we could get that from the Democratic Party or from some other place down to us to say this is what would work, and this is some language we would suggest you use, because we don't necessarily have the bandwidth to sit around and figure out what that perfect language is.
Right, exactly.
That would be a request,
Yeah.
please.
But, those come from specialists. They're the class of political consultants who do nothing but derive messaging from polling. And in my experience, sometimes they're right and sometimes they're terribly wrong. So I would prefer something that actually did come from you. Not that you have to develop it, but that you help develop. Because you know your district better than I do, living in Washington County. Right. You know it better than the DPO does, living in Portland, and you certainly know it better than a consultant living in Washington, D.C.
So to that point,
Yeah.
Lisa Flexner, Ben. I talk a lot, sorry. Two things. First of all, George Lakoff announced, the linguist announced today or yesterday, a partnership think tank based out of Berkeley with Dianne Feinstein and a couple of other leaders to work specifically, specifically on that issue. To look at languaging. So it is brand new. I just got an email about it this morning as I walked in, so I can look into that a little bit further and pass that information along to Jessica to pass around. The second thing is, I'm not here representing Indivisible. I'm here representing Action Together Oregon, Central Oregon, and our Central Oregon Action Together community specifically decided that trying to develop appropriate messaging for Central Oregon, for ORD2, was what we were about. Good. So if we can, so from a grassroots level, so Lakoff and Feinstein are taking it from the top down. From a grassroots level, if we get information and input from everyone in this room and all of the communities that you represent, hopefully we can come together with that sort of shared messaging that we can use across ORD2 and that's appropriate for our local communities. As somebody said, I think it was Mamie said earlier, Prineville is different than Grants Pass, is different than Ontario, is different than Baker City, is different than Ashland. So we need to have messaging that's appropriate for our local communities and messaging that's consistent across ORD2. And hopefully we can figure out a way without all of us being overwhelmed to make that happen. So that's one of our areas of interest.
Will we be getting your contact information?
Sure.
We'll
We'll make
definitely be
that
getting her
happen.
contact information.
Especially you two from Sisters.
Yeah,
Kind
we
of
talk.
segues into Pam Marsh's comments about trying to get the legislative Democrats to agree on something. And this may not sound very popular, but I'd like to put forth that I think there's people like me out there. I was raised in Arizona, John Birch Society, parents and so on, didn't sit well with me.
Can you
left.
speak up?
Sorry, I'm Susan from Ashland. I want to give some feedback to you all. I was raised in Arizona, John Birch Society, hard right, Republicans, didn't sit well, left, moved to Northern California, felt very comfortable with the Democratic Party. But I can tell you, I'm tipping like this now. I'm very unhappy that the Democrats legislatures, both in California and here in Oregon, can't figure out how to work together and move in the direction you say is a battle to move to. And that means someone like me is thinking to themselves, you know, maybe I don't want to be affiliated with the Democratic Party now. Maybe I'll just go independent. I'll always vote, and then I'll have to figure out how I'm going to vote, primary-wise and so on. But I think that segment of people who have gotten fed up with the inactivity of a group that already has authority, I can't think I'm just the only one out there.
No, you're not. I think here in Oregon, Democrats in the legislature have a pretty strong agreement on fundamental values. But I do think the election last fall shook us all to the core. You know, we had here in Oregon not only the Trump devastation to deal with and the self-analysis that came out of that. We also had Measure 97, and many of you were involved in that campaign. It was a big tax effort. It would have changed the face of what we're doing in the legislature this year, and it failed. It failed pretty miserably. So there has been a tremendous regrouping that's had to happen out of that. We still know that we need revenue to move forward. That's a fundamental values issue. You know, we have Republicans stepping up and saying, well, it's simply a matter of cost cutting, and yet we look at a $1.6 or $1.8 billion deficit, and we know that's about keeping 350,000 people on Medicaid. That doesn't even include any kind of additional investment in K-12 or pre-K or college. So we have spent about 3 months trying to, I think, regroup to see if business interests who said they were interested in stepping up if Measure 97 failed, see if they actually do so. And we are getting ready to send the conversation forward around revenue and building a budget that I think will force a lot of these issues to the fore. You know, are we as a state going to invest in kids? Are we going to invest in families? Are we going to just try to scrabble together a budget as we've done since 1990 with the passage of Measure 5? Or are we going to do something different? This is really
Well, I think that's the question.
the core conversation in the next...
For the words to transfer to action.
Yeah, and but it's not just Democrats. I mean, we cannot do this alone. We have to have
You have to show
we
us
have
that
to
you
have a
can do it.
3/5 majority to pass tax legislation. And I think that will be the core issue over the next couple of weeks.
How many more do you need? How many more Democrats?
Well, we have 35 Democrats in the House. We need 36 people to vote for a tax measure. I just had a thought. What was the thought that I was going to share? Anyway, it's a challenge, and again, we just need everybody to step up and understand how important the state level conversation really is.
So you and then you.
Are we going, about the tax measure, Senator, are we going to repeal and replace some of 97 to go back to that same source for taxation?
Well, what we're looking at, and I remember the thought that just escaped me, which is a great piece of data that I heard this week. In 1990, those of you who lived in Oregon remember that we had something called Measure 5, which was the beginning of our reform of the property tax.
Yeah.
After Measure 95 passed in 1990, there was a difference of almost $2 billion in revenue per year impacted by Measure 5. We lost, as state and local communities, almost $2 billion a year of revenue. That's the gap that we're still trying to replace. All these many years later, we've been scrambling around trying to figure out in a state without a sales tax, where sales tax has been turned down 9 times, how we put that $2 billion back in our local and state budgets to fund schools and, fundamental government institutions.
Well, I guess my question goes back to, from that goes to, what is the new
The
message?
plan? Yeah.
What is the new message that we need to get out there? And I think it needs to include that making tax decisions is a values choice, but we can demonstrate that making those choices in the long run makes economic sense. Because in the short term, yeah, we say we made a $2 billion dent in something, but what did we actually lose? I mean, so I can use, for example, the investment that we decided we invested in women's health. It's been proven by numerous statistical and verifiable studies that if we raise the birth weight of every baby born in America by 1/2 of a pound, we will undoubtedly, the figure saved in lifetime medical costs is $1.6 million per birth. I mean, those kind of messages will get to people who are hard about the economics, because if they see that it is actually beneficial, an investment for the future, that's the message that I want to hear.
I agree with you. I mean, and that's a choice that's in front of us. Do we scrabble together a budget as we have since 1990, robbing, raising fees, doing whatever we can to just keep things together? Or do we really take a deep breath, go make some significant transformation in our tax system and have the ability to really invest up front? I mean, here in this valley, and Colette knows this, we are beset, and this is what I always go to, with many families who are really dealing with intergenerational poverty, abuse, addiction. Over and over and again, we see these patterns repeated by the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. Every employer that comes to testify in front of the legislature on some topic or another has something to say about the workplace and then about the workers that they have available to them and the inadequacy of those workers. The only way we stop this rolling cycle, right, which costs us more every year, is to invest at the front, to invest in that 0 to 5-year-old, those kids, those families. We know where brain development takes place. 90% of it is right in that little segment. Until we are willing to really acknowledge that and invest in those upfront things, we just pay the costs. And I think, I think there are some places where we understand that. Healthcare actually is a place where we understand that in Oregon. If we can continue with the transformation that's underway right now, that we started before the feds ever started healthcare transformation, we are starting to change outcomes. We are starting to see emergency room visits for people on OHP decline, right? We are starting to do little investments in prevention that change the long-term trajectory. Those are smart. That is smart investment. But it also costs more money to get those things going. I mean, you can't invest upfront. That's right. We're gonna see the outcomes of it down, far down the line. So it's that constant tension between investing, just taking care of the issues now, or really understanding that we need to take a deep breath and do something different.
One last thing. There's a resource online that you could tap into, and it was given to me during a winter meeting in Seattle. It's called the Schwartz Report. If you just Google that up, you'll get, basically, the things that I was mentioning are all there in statistics and data, and they can reference real statistics that have been gathered over a period of years, and it's put together in numerous ways. That's a great resource if you're interested.
Great. I'll look it up. I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah.
Paula from Sisters. How concerned should we be about Richardson's redistricting effort? Sorry to bring that up.
Yeah, I wouldn't at this moment get too worked up over it. I think we have to watch it carefully, but the Secretary of State really does not have a role in redistricting. It is the job of the legislature. And in fact, the last time it was done, we had a split legislature. That was the year we had 30 Republicans and 30 Democrats, and they figured out how to redistrict pretty successfully, and the Secretary of State had no role in redistricting. I think we just have to watch that he doesn't, we're watching him unless there's, he takes it to the ballot or does something to really change the fundamental structure.
Yeah, what's his game?
It's hard to know.
Okay.
Well, I mean, we do know what the game is. I would say his proposal hasn't been met, even with some of the more institutional sources, very positively. It's very complex, apparently. I haven't looked at it, but, our attitude in the legislature is, this is our job. We're going to do, when time comes up, which is not for another 4 or 5 years, we will take that on. We'll do a good job with it.
Yeah, the premise of him coming up with this plan is that the current process creates gerrymandered districts that favor one party over another. And the reality is that there are no gerrymandered districts to speak of here. There are no crazy, peninsular, weird griffin-shaped districts that are carved out. It's difficult to create districts under the current federal law that don't turn out the way that they turn out. I had the opportunity to speak with Senator Devlin, who was instrumental in working on the districting in 2010. And he said there's one district, House District 26, which is a weird one that goes up from Marion County up through Wilsonville and touches Washington County. And it was the leftover, and even that was not gerrymandered. It was just kind of like an odd shape, odd thing. But out of 36 districts, one district that's a little odd is not so bad. So it's his plan is a solution for a problem that doesn't exist.
But if he says it enough, people will believe it.
Exactly, and it sows doubt about the political process, and that's, I think, his end game.
Ron, I would say that the second congressional district is a gerrymandered district.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's good for Oregon overall because we get 4 Democratic congressmen.
Well, again, the way that the congressional districts in the state are divvied up has got a lot to do with the delegates, the Congress people who are sitting in there. They all kind of get together and they make the proposal and present it to the state legislature. The state legislature doesn't have the power to tell, Pete DeFazio and Bonamici and Blumenauer what their districts are going to be. So there's a lot of horse trading that goes on, but it's not, again, it's not like in the East Coast where you have these things where districts are shaped like barbells along freeways to avoid certain...
Texas.
Yeah, Texas is terrible. 2 of my kids live in Austin. And Austin's one of the most progressive places in the country, as progressive as Portland. And the Texas legislature have divvied that up so that districts radiate out of Portland, out of Austin. They have four state senate districts that go out of there, and none of them have enough Democrats in them to elect a Democrat or progressive. So they're unrepresented, basically, in the state legislature. That's gerrymandering. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mary. I live in Portland, and I'm a volunteer with Indivisible National. And I have a question about the Democratic Party of Oregon, and would just love some of your thoughts on lessons learned on how to organize with communities of color and lower income communities, because this is certainly a very live conversation at the national level, given that, let's look around the room. A lot of us look alike and probably come from very similar backgrounds. But if you look at the future of this country, this is not what the country's going to look like, and it can't look like this. And so would love any ideas that you might have for folks in this room and for us moving forward on how to break out of.
Well, I wish we knew. I wish we had the answer. We're working with our coalition partners like Color Pack and other community-based organizations in the communities of color to figure that out, because we have the same problem statewide that we see in this room. And it's like that. How do you get over that hump? Everyone here is willing to share power and to bring in communities of color, but how do you make that happen? We can't figure out. Part of it's cultural competence. Part of it is not just inviting people for a seat at the table, but actually having a seat there and moving over so that there's room for those folks.
But can I just say something?
Yes.
I just want to share something that I think is pretty exciting in that realm, which is that we have 10 new Democratic members of the House this time. We have no white males, not that we don't honor the white males among us. I think of the 10, 7 of us are female. We have a gay member, we have Hispanic first generation, we have Hispanic born in Mexico, we have an African-American woman. So we are reflecting the diversity that exists within the state. And I think when you start to have people in positions of power
That's right.
who represent those constituencies, then, it's exciting, and you get people to step up. And I think that's a tremendous statement about where we can go and the impact of those communities.
Yeah, representation is important.
Mhm.
It really is, because you can't go to a community and say how great your party is for their community if you don't have anybody who represents that community in your leadership.
Every once in a while,
in the State House.
on the floor of the House, we have reasons for the two parties to have a quick conference with each other. So the Democrats will go to one corner and the Republicans will go to one corner. It's so funny looking at the Republicans because they all look exactly the same from the back. They all have on suits and they're all white men, except there are 3 women actually out of the 25. We really do have, we actually have a majority of women in our Democratic caucus in the House. How cool is that?
Cool. And you have a question.
Barbara from Crook County. Response to inviting diversity to a seat at the table. You need to turn it around. You need to beg a seat at the other tables. Because as a white, imagine if you are a person of color, and there are some in here, but, walking into another room full of bucking white people.
Yeah.
No, so if you want to make a difference, you have to go to those communities and be a real ally.
But this is Oregon, there's so many of us here.
Yeah.
I just one thought is we have, I can't remember exactly the phrase, it's like a Quaker phrase, you have two ears and one mouth and they should be used in that proportion, So I think we can't just invite them and expect them to play, but we have to listen to their needs and understand, seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Yeah, and give support. When there are candidates from communities of color, support them. Get out there and get them elected. Yeah.
Josefina, the issues? Well, the thing is, the Latino Network is help us, like Latinos or people of color, to engage political positions. And I enjoy Unidos, like Latino Network, and it's now a new association, more political. It's called OLA, O-L-A-A. And the intention of that institution or organization is Latinos like me, they can take political positions. Either we are born or not born in here in the United States, but have like that kind of sensation that you need to do something for your community. And the only way that you can do that thing is involved in the political things that Teresa Alonso for good work and Hernandez. We have 4 Latinos already in over there in Salem working for us, and 3 of the Latinos came from the Latinos Network. Yeah, as Greg Delgado too, from Ben.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a question for once.
Hey.
I would like to know, it's kind of the elephant, or rather the donkey in the room, what we should be looking for in candidate development so that we can start recruiting the right people at the local level, the state level, to build into great candidates in the future. So I know you can't talk to specific people, but what are the qualities or the attributes that we should be looking for?
Well, you know, I recruit a lot of, I work to recruit a lot of candidates for offices like school board and water district, and less so for like the state legislature. But it's all of a piece. You look for somebody who burns with a passion and shares your values, you know. And if they're running for school board, you want to make sure that they have the expertise to be a good school board member, not just a good candidate, but once they're there, that they can actually implement good policies for the community. And that means being able to read a budget, being able to draft a budget, being able to understand tax issues. You know, you don't want somebody who can sloganeer but actually doesn't have the depth of knowledge or expertise to do the job that they're seeking.
It's like a president.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I'm Sid, I'm here from Bend. In terms of finding candidates, particularly at the local level, it's really important. We're talking about novices to the process. And sadly, it takes a certain type of qualities of people to be able to run effectively and win, and the skill set for that isn't always the same as that you have for the people that actually are going to then serve in that. Right. And so we need to have people who are going to do a good job serving. And so with the help that we need, and from GPO, I suggest might be a good place for it, is helping people who know how to, would be good at serving, but it's like, well, what do I have to do? I don't know how to run a campaign. You've got Future PAC that can help folks. That's true, but you need people that know how to be the treasurer, know how to follow. People who can get on the Orstar and pick up. How can the party, without having to say, you can do this for any candidate that wants to do that, help with providing people with that nuts and bolts support, who would be good for governing, but probably maybe suck at running campaigns?
Well, we do candidate trainings periodically throughout the state. We'll be doing a large one probably in August of this year for nonpartisan elections, because we'll be having city council and county commission races coming up a year from this May. And those are critically important too, especially the county commission. So we provide training. And there are also there's labor candidate school, which is really great. It's run by the AFL-CIO, and they take their folks out of grassroots folks out of their unions to run for political office. There's also the Emerge program, which is really good, which focuses on women candidates. And they're both in-depth programs. They're like 6-week programs. Ours are just a 2-day thing. So we'd like to do more of that and provide potential candidates, people thinking about running for office, with the tools to be good candidates so they can become effective elected officials.
To follow on a little bit, in identifying people who would be willing to be campaign managers or treasurers for campaigns, not necessarily the candidates, because if people knew that they had somebody that could do that, then they're more likely to enter a race.
And actually our trainings are sort of twofold. There's the candidate side and then there's the support side. Right. It's also training our people, our grassroots activists, how to be good support people. Right. And part of that is being good campaign staff, because a lot of these campaigns for local office, they can't afford to pay anybody, right? There's no budget there. There's not enough interest in money in these races, so they're dependent on having somebody volunteer for their campaign, volunteer treasurer, volunteer campaign manager, volunteer messaging, volunteer everything. Yes?
The Wellstone Foundation puts on superb candidate training.
Yes.
And they do it all over the country, so all you need to do is kind of go online and see where they're going to have a training session, and they're fabulous.
Democracy for America, too.
Yeah, and they're relatively inexpensive, but they are wonderful.
The thing about it is that these programs are all good, and they all look at the same skill sets from different angles. It's not rocket science, believe me. Running a campaign is hard work, but it's not that complicated.
It really isn't. You just have to attend to some basic points and you'll be successful. Yeah.
So, hi guys, I'm Colette. I'm from Rogue Valley, and Alan actually participated in the Rogue Valley Southern Oregon Community Candidate School that Sarah Westover, the two of us, Kay Brooks, who will be here in a little bit,
Yes.
as well as some other people did. We did it for the election that's coming up this month. So unfortunately, the hard part about what you're talking about, Sid, is that we needed to have those candidates now because we're voting. So for next year, that would be something that we could totally talk about, like with different counties. We did a school that was focusing on
School board.
yeah, school board, RBTD, which is the transportation district, as well as some other races. But really what that was bringing people like out of the woodwork who had never run for anything before or maybe just thought about it. And so we sort of split people into groups based on if they wanted to run for something but weren't really sure what that was, and then everyone else ended up being the support and the people that had skills, the people with the messaging skills and all those things. So Sarah Westover is a really, really great resource.
Hopefully
Evan
she'll
Lasley.
talk about that tomorrow. I don't know if that's part of her presentation or not,
But our favorite part about that whole thing was it was free.
Yeah.
And also because it was an opportunity for people to get involved who maybe just didn't really know where to start. And it was a really great resource, and so we'd love to talk to anybody who's interested.
And there's a lot of great candidates now on May 16th. Everybody vote. But there's a lot of great candidates out there on our ballot, I think, partially because of that effort by the community.
We have 8 people that ended up filing, so it's pretty exciting.
Yeah. Thanks.
One of the, yes. One of the most effective candidate recruitment trainings I've ever experienced or been involved with or helped put together is basically a panel of elected officials, locally elected officials who just talk about their experience running, and because they've been there. And they can talk anecdotally about the challenges you face and what you need to do, and then you can go into more technical trainings. But that's really helpful for people who are thinking about it, who are on the bubble. It's talking to people who've actually done it and what motivated them. Because they all, everybody comes from the same place. Nobody gets out of college and says, I'm going to be a school board member, right? They're responding to needs of the community and the desire to be of service. How's our time?
Got about 6 minutes.
Okay, yeah, I kept waiting for the woman with the yellow 5 minutes.
Not yet.
One more minute.
Emma from Plymouth, I have a quick question about if anyone is monitoring the sort of really long-term demographics of the district. I was talking to a realtor in Plymouth Falls who says there's a lot of Democrats moving into town. Is that happening all over the district, or is that just
In spots, it's happening in like
big
Bend.
enough to be excited about?
Not tomorrow,
Yeah.
but down the line, yes. This happened in Washington County where I live. I moved to Washington County about 11 years ago, and it was a purple district, right? There were some Democrats and some Republicans. It had been a red district 5 years before. It was on the cusp of changing. I'd like to say that it changed because I moved there, but that's not true. It changed because Intel and Nike hired a bunch of people who were highly educated and were natural-born progressives who moved there, and they changed the district. And that kind of demographic shift is happening in spots in CD2. But I don't know long-term what that portends.
This is about redistricting again. After the 2020, I forget what year it is, after the 2020 census count, might Sisters, Redmond, Prineville, Bend get their own new district? And we'd have a better chance of electing a Democrat?
I don't know.
You're talking about congressional?
Yeah, I'm talking about national congressional.
Yeah.
We almost got a 6th
congressional district during the last apportionment. We missed it by a whisker. We will certainly get a 6th congressional district after the 2020 census. You know, population growth has been like that in Oregon.
But we don't know how it'll be divvied.
No, it's up to the legislature. So to make sure that you have a majority, elected majority, progressives, the Oregon legislature in 2020, so that we get a good outcome.
Actually, you answered the question, because the related question was, how close are we to getting a 6th delegate?
Yeah,
That's
very
all.
close. I mean, it's almost without question that we'll get one.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that, if I could just say, the Secretary of State problem that we have
Yes.
is a reason we have to pay attention to the state level elections, because he hasn't done anything yet. We're all waiting, we're watching, but we should not have statewide electeds in vulnerable positions like that who are not Democrats. We shouldn't have them there. And for a variety of reasons, we do, even in a blue state, so. Okay.
Yeah, you had a question.
Well, I just wanted to make a point on the
Name
district.
and where you're from, please?
Tom Zaronskis from Bend. The districts have to be about 735,000 people or something like that, roughly. And the Bend area, as much as I'd love it to be in its own district, we're not close.
Right.
We're going to be tied, unless somebody gets creative and we start to get into the gerrymandering a little bit, we're likely in Bend to be tied to the east side of the mountains. I mean, it's just, the numbers are just there. That's the way it
How
is.
about Bend and Ashland? With maybe a little thin stretch.
That includes cisterns.
Did you have a question?
A question, Barbara from Crook County. Question about, do you see any eroding of the blueness, the dimming of the blueness because of Richardson, or the amount of challenge that Kate Brown's going to get in the next election?
I think there was some impact on that. We held our own in terms of numbers and like in the House and the Senate, with the exception of the Bates seat. We could have done better. Our goal was to hold, but some of the people who won, particularly in the coastal areas, won by a hair. Senator Roblin, who's a long-time legislator from the coast, won by 200 votes. Kathy McEwen, who's a legislator in Coos Bay, won by more than a couple hundred votes, but she spent a ton of money and her opposition spent very little. That takes its toll on the legislative process, because those individuals are now pretty gun shy about the votes they're willing to take. Because if they're going to go back and run again, and they won by 200 votes, that undermines what we can do as a progressive majority. So we did see that impact. I think the Secretary of State was less about Trump and more about the candidates that were lined up in that race. But we saw a little bit of a head. I'm not particularly worried about that on the long term.
We were at the mercy of the wave, as like I was telling you before, and the election last fall was a really weird one. It really brought out the weird in people and in the voters. So, Trump succeeded in a lot of counties here that I didn't expect him to.
But we still won the state. And the last time we had a wave, we got Jeff Merkley to defeat an incumbent, which was unheard of. So we're doing pretty well in the wave stuff, but we just need to make sure that we don't lose any other statewide seats.
You and then you.
Lisa from Bend. This may be totally off topic and you can feel free to defer, but there are some folks in Bend who are very worried about the Confederation of States issue and the Constitution. And I'm wondering, because I want to take that information back, if that's on the radar for the DPO and the legislature, if it's something that we should even be concerned about at this point.
Can you explain what that means?
It is,
So It verges on conspiracy theory, and I'm just going to put that out right there. But there are two ways to pass a constitutional amendment. One is nationwide vote with 2/3 majority and 2/3 of the other one is the states. And if there are enough states who have one house, not both houses and the governor, but just one house to pass the constitutional amendment, then the amendment can pass. And from what I understand from my colleagues who are researching this, we're 6 houses away in various states in the country. North Carolina just already passed a bill saying that they are ready for a constitutional referendum.
On what?
On the Constitution.
It's a constitutional convention, you're
Yeah, that's
actually
the-
using
thank
different
you.
terminology.
Thank you.
And it means that we're going to rethink the entire Constitution.
So, like I said, it verges on conspiracy theory. That's why I'm taking it to you guys and saying, what are we thinking at the state level from the DPO and from the legislature, and is this something that should be on our radar in Oregon?
Well, from the state level, we're not talking about it at all. I know that there have been various efforts coming forward to do very specific kind of constitutional conventions. I don't think there's a lot of interest in going down that path. If this is something that we should be alarmed about, we should put it on the radar, because I haven't heard anything about it.
Okay, thanks, Ben.
Yeah, and it's not something that we're deeply concerned about here because we have control of the State House and both houses of the legislature, and that's our main focus. So it takes us out of the picture in terms of that happening in Oregon. It's concerning.
If it happens nationally with 36 states sign up for it, then it forces a complete rethink.
I understand, but there's not much I can do in the DPO to impact that in other states. So, you know, I'm like you, I'm watching it happen, but I don't. It's not a strategic.
So it's on the radar, but not specifically related to Oregon. It's just on the radar nationally.
Yeah.
Okay.
We do have a piece of legislation you might be interested in as a group that would basically have Oregon commit our electoral votes to whoever wins the popular vote. And that will go into effect whenever a minimum number of states vote for that. And I'm a sponsor of that legislation. It has passed the House a few times. Thank you. And we, unfortunately, the election last year may in some ways make it more difficult to pass that because the Republicans who were on board in the past are now not sure they're going to be on board. But that would, it would be a good step of reform.
So I've been told we need to stop.
Okay.
Time is up. Thank you so much.
Okay, everybody, I know it's starting to get a little nappy-wappy time, but we do have one more session, and I do believe it's going to be an extremely powerful session because it's about how to maintain a long-term grassroots movement.